If I could have everyone's attention, please. If I could have everyone's attention, please. I put my lipstick on it. It's not enough. It's not. If I could have everyone's attention, please. It seems that the mics are not working.
Good morning. You already made copies for me. I can put these back.
I know someone made copies.
These back later. SSI and those kinds of things. Sure. Right.
Hi. Oh, hello. Hi. We're gonna. This is Will. We're gonna take like just 30 more seconds to let everyone have a seat, and then we'll get started.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, everyone, for being here. My name is Brian Scarpelli. My organization is ACT, the App Association, and I'm one of the co-chairs here of the FCC's Disability Advisory Committee meeting. This is our September 24th public meeting. Thank you for being here. I hope everyone, well, actually, that's my welcome. I want to make sure to my co-chair say any words if you want.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Isidore with the National Black Deaf Advocates and BDA. I am one of your co-chairs also for the full DAC. Happy to see everyone again.
Okay. So I think before roll call, we wanted the first, just moving down on the agenda here. The first person is that we'd pass the microphone to is Patrick.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. I'm Patrick Weber, Chief of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau here at the FCC. And welcome to the second meeting of the third term of the Disability Advisory Committee. For some, summer means hot, lazy days, but not for this group. While some days may have been hot, this summer, 2 working groups have been very busy addressing the 2 issues the Commission asked them to look into. One working group, led by Zainab El-Kebsi of the National Association of the Deaf, worked on the issues of integrating real-time text, or RTT, with video relay service, or VRS. The DAC will be reviewing the group's recommendations to initiate a rulemaking process for integrating RTT into point-to-point calls and to have a notice of inquiry to explore issues associated with the integration of RTT into VRS calls when there is a video relay operator present. The other working group, led by Carl Richardson, representing the City of Boston, worked on issues of providing reliable information about television programs with audio description. The group suggests various methods to ensure that television viewers can count on the accuracy of information about programs with audio description. The DAC's past work has been very helpful on a multitude of subjects, and we are confident that the same will be true regarding these 2 current issues. Thanks for all your hard work on the recommendations before you today. Before we delve into our discussions this morning, I am pleased to introduce a familiar face. Diane Burstein, sitting to my left, is a new Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau Deputy Bureau Chief, overseeing our Disability Rights Office. Many of you already know Diane because she was a member of this very committee representing CTIA. Diane brings a tremendous amount of experience and knowledge to this position, and we are looking forward to the DAC, the Disability Rights Office, and the FCC in general benefiting from her service. With her leadership and the dedicated DRO staff, as well as your engagement, I am confident the accessibility space will continue to be well represented and fully engaged at the Commission. Thanks again for your commitment to working on issues before the DAC. I hope you have a productive meeting. And with that, I'll turn it over to Diane to say a few words.
Thank you, Patrick. And hello, everyone. I see a lot of familiar faces. And for anyone who doesn't know me already, my name is Diane Burstein. I'm the relatively new Deputy Chief of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. I started in May, right after, I believe it was the first meeting of the DAC. On behalf of CGB, I'd like to thank all of you for volunteering to be on the DAC. And having served on the DAC in my previous life, I know from personal experience that it can take a lot of time out of your regular work. And however, in my short time I've been here, I've already seen how invaluable the work is that you do here in the form of your recommendations. We've taken steps to make the DAC more efficient and to ensure that your time with us is productive. Please continue to give us feedback about how the DAC is working from your perspective. To Will Schell, to my left, the designated federal officer, and we'll continue to work on improving its operation to make sure that it works well for everyone. I want to thank the Disability Rights Office for working hard on getting these meetings set up. Really, thank you for the breakfast this morning and for all the work that you do, the background work, on making sure this is a full and productive meeting. There are 2 recommendations scheduled to be discussed today. And as Patrick mentioned, I'd like to acknowledge the chairs of the working group, Zainab El-Kebsi from the National Association of the Deaf and Carl Richardson representing the City of Boston. Thanks for leading the working groups, and it cannot be easy to reach consensus on all this, but we really do appreciate that you reached a timely conclusion that you can bring to the DAC this morning. And I'd also like to recognize the co-chairs of the Disability Advisory Committee, Brian Scarpelli from ACT, and Isidore Nyangabo from the National Black Deaf Advocates. Thank you both for your efforts in chairing the DAC. With that, let's get the fun started. I'll turn it back over to Will Schell, who can tell you more about how this morning will proceed. Thank you.
Hi, this is Will Shell, the designated federal officer, and I'm glad everyone's here and has a cup of coffee. And we are going to be running very quickly, so there's a lot to cover today. And first thing that we normally do is cover some of the housekeeping rules. So this meeting's open to the public, and if you're watching on fcc.gov/live, you can also submit public comments at livequestions@fcc.gov. That's an email address where we will, during the public comment period, we will we will read out public comments. If you're in the room and want to access the Wi-Fi, the password is capital F, capital C, 823302. It's also on the pillars in the room. There's little signs there, so hopefully you can find it or find someone who has it. Let's cover the communication rules really quickly. Most people in the room already have heard this a dozen times, but we'll just do it again because it's always a good reminder. You can turn your name card up. Turn your name cup if you want to be called upon. One person speaking at a time, and we also need to make sure before we start speaking that everyone is aware that the camera is on you and that the microphones are working for the voice so that we can get the cart and the video. So it may take a second, so be patient. Keep your card up, your hand up if you want the camera to turn on to you. And identify yourself before commenting, and then also try to speak slowly and clearly, especially if you're reading something out loud. And like I said, one person at a time. The restrooms are in this out the doors, down the hall, and to the left. If you need some assistance, there's some people around. Hopefully they'll catch you, but otherwise out the door, down the hall to the left. And then I also just want to thank the lunch sponsor, CTIA. Matt Gertz is here, and we're already drinking all the coffee and eating all the bagels. Thank you very much, CTIA. It's really helpful. And super generous. Just to be clear, the lunch procedures, this meeting's open to the public, but the lunch is not open to the public. Anyone who's involved with the DAC can have lunch, but I just want to, members of the public, please try not to eat lunch. But with that, I will pass it back to the co-chair, Brian Scarpelli, to whisk us away down the very speedy agenda that we have. Thanks, everybody.
It's on?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Next item up on our agenda is roll call. So why don't we just go around and everybody introduce themselves. Brian Scarpelli with ACT.
Hi, Isidore with National Black Deaf Advocates.
Good morning. My name is Deborah Patkin, and I'm Deputy Designated Federal Officer.
Hi, everyone. I'm Susie Rosen-Singleton, the Chief of the Disability Rights Office at the FCC.
Good morning. This is Elliot Greenwald, Deputy Chief, Disability Rights Office.
Good morning. Darlene Parker with the National Captioning Institute.
Good morning. Tom Lidkowski with Comcast.
Good morning. Michael Maddox with Sorensen Communications.
Good morning, everyone. Michael Strecker with Clear Captions. Good morning, Dixie Ziegler with Hamilton Relay.
Good morning, everybody. Tony Stevens with the American Council of the Blind.
Good morning, Townsend Davis with ABC Television and the Walt Disney Company.
Good morning, Sam Yale with Level Access.
Good morning, Everett Bacon with the National Federation of the Blind.
Good morning, Kate Jones with Federal Emergency Management Agency.
Good morning, all. This is Lisa Hamlin from the Hearing Loss Association of America.
Buenos días, Maria Diaz from DiCapta.
Good morning, Pam Holmes with Ultratech Capto.
Good morning, I am Brian Traeger from the National Technical Institute for the Deaf. Good morning, I'm Brianne Berger from the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Special Education Rehabilitation Services. Good morning, I am Christian Vogler with Gallaudet University's Technology Access Program. Hello, good morning, this is Zainab El-Kebsi with the National Association of the Deaf. Hello, everyone. I am Claude Stout. I'm with Telecommunications for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. I'm Jeff Rosen with Convo. Hello, I am Greg Leibach with CSD VRS.
Hi, I'm Amita Srinivasan, and I'm with Deaf Blind Citizens Connect.
Hello, good morning. I'm Becky Rosenthal, and I'm with the National Association of State Relay Administration.
Good morning, I'm Carl Richardson, and I'm with the City of Boston.
Good morning, I'm Ian Dillner with Verizon.
Good morning, Sarah Malera with the American Foundation for the Blind.
Good morning, Linda Vanderloop, AT&T.
Paul Schrader, IRA.
Matt Gerst with CTIA.
Heather York with VITAC.
Dennis Selznick with Sprint.
Joel Snyder, Audio Description Associates, and the American Council of the Blind's Audio Description Project.
Patrick Weber with the FCC.
Diane Burstein, FCC.
This is Will Schell from the FCC.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for introducing yourselves. The next item up on the agenda, we turn to Susie with DRO for. Oh, hi. Sorry about that. Paul.
Hi, Paul Schrader with IRA. I'm wondering, I know we have a tight agenda, but I'm wondering if Diane would take like maybe 2 minutes just to, you're new to the commission and to this role. I wonder if you might just make a minute or two of what your priorities are, what you'd like to achieve as we kind of weave into the DRO. If you could do that, I think it would be great.
Thank you. It's been quite an immersion for me since I've been here, about 4 months, I guess, at this point, Paul. And I think that really it's been fantastic to see the dedication of the people who work here at the FCC from top to bottom, really, in terms of their interest in ensuring that the programs that we have to serve people with disabilities continue to be strong, and that we're continually looking at new ways to help make improvements. So I think there's been, tremendous dedication from the Disability Rights Office. I always knew that on the outside, looking at the FCC, but now that I have the privilege of being here on the inside, it's just a remarkable group of people, and I feel privileged to have the opportunity to work with them. So if that gives you a snapshot of where things are.
Great. Thanks. Thank you very much. Right, the next item on the agenda is updates from the Disability Rights Office. So if it's okay to turn to you, Susie, go ahead.
Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Susie speaking. I'd like to add to Diane's statements about priorities of the Disability Rights Office. And really, our priority is to carry out the FCC's mission in 2018 to 22 strategic plan, which outlines it. And there are 5 specific goals that are outlined in that plan, which includes closing the digital divide, as it is called, consumer protections, amongst many others. So we do have that on our website. Our mission is to carry out those strategic goals outlined by the FCC, so you can see those woven throughout all the different things that we've accomplished here. And I'm trying to bring you some highlights that have happened since our last meeting in April. Of course, there's a lot that we have been doing over the course of the summer. As Patrick said, it has not been a lazy summer for us. I know that all of us, including yourselves and DRO, have been working very, very hard. Of course, it's conference season over the summer. We've been to many, many different conferences like the American Council for the Blind, TDI, the TDI conference, the National Black Deaf Advocates Conference, NINA for emergency access, M-enabling, and I know many of you in this room have also been present at some of these as well, so you've been on top of a lot of the work that we have been doing. In June of 2018, so just this past June, we awarded 2 nominees for the Chairman's Awards for Advancements in Accessibility, also called the Chairman's AAA, in which we recognize people in the field who are trying to improve accessibility in the technology space, and we are certainly going to rely on a lot of you for nominations for the upcoming 2020. However, the winners for 2018 were the Cisco 8800 series phones, text-to-voice functionality to improve access, and then the second awardee was the Microsoft, Tobii, and iTech combined effort on the USB human interface device standard for eye trackers. So congratulations to those 2 awardees. We hope to see many more nominees coming in this coming year. We will release more information about when the nomination period opens as that becomes available. We have also been working not only at the FCC but also on best practices. We are open for comment here on our Section 504 related accessibility programs and services at the Commission. So we have a mandate on a triennial basis to look at our programs and services. We have already released a public notice inviting your comments. Comments are due October 21st. We are hoping to hear from you. If you have any feedback about how we can improve our Section 504 handbook as well, which is also posted on the web. Second, as many of you are heavy users of our ECFS, electronic comment filing system at the FCC, we are going to be doing an overhaul of that system here at the Commission. And we do welcome your comments about how we can make it easier for you to file comments. What are the accessibility issues that may be present in the current system, and we are looking for comments from external stakeholders. If you're interested in coming to our roundtable, please do send me your name as soon as possible so that we can send you an invite as an individual to participate in that roundtable meeting, which we expect to be in October or November. We look forward to getting your feedback on that project. Moving on to emergency access, in that content area, we have 3 major rulemaking activities since April. The first, we had the Emergency Alerting System test, the nationwide test, in collaboration with FEMA. So thank you for all of the feedback that you've provided about your experiences with that test and the accessibility of that test. We are now looking into some alleged violations of our rules with regards to that test, and we will keep you abreast of any developments there, and we will also release a report about our findings of the accessibility and the next steps to address any of those deficiencies that we located, and recognizing some best practices for effective use of the ES system in the test for emergency alerting. Second, access to 911. We adopted in August 1st, in fact, a report in order to address calls to 911 through MLTS, multi-line telephone systems, MLTS. And these are systems that are commonly found in hotels and office buildings. Those rules were implemented in order to carry out Kerry's Law, which is to remove the requirement that someone must dial 9 before being able to dial 911, so that any individual will be able to dial 911 from any phone, even an MLTS. So in this building, for example, you can now dial 911 without dialing 9 first to get an outside line as a requirement by the FCC pursuant to that law. And then secondly, this is a requirement for dispatchable location in 911. Dispatchable location means not simply providing a street address, but room number, floor number, or other information in order to specify the location of an emergency, such that a rescuer or first responder will be able to find you. It really is very important. We've added that requirement for dispatchable location for mobile text, internet-based TRS, and interconnected VoIP, voice over internet protocol, VoIP services, as well as fixed telephone services, et cetera, to ensure that you can be found in the event of an emergency. The last topic for emergency access has to do with our annual reminder to industry that we released on August 30th to let industry know that there is an obligation to make televised emergency information accessible to people who are blind or visually impaired, deaf or hard of hearing, et cetera, via captioning and video description. All those requirements exist, and to let consumers know how to file complaints about such information if you have any concerns about that. And then also we have a new ASL video, thanks to Deborah Packin to my right here, who was the signer for that video, which describes our rules around accessible emergency information on television. That video was released. Moving on to hearing aid compatibility. In August, we announced 2 new deadlines. The first, no later than September 3rd, wireless service providers must post on their websites expanded information about their handsets' hack, hearing aid compatibility, capabilities, such that the public should be able to find that information more easily when looking for hearing aid compatible equipment. Second, no later than October 3rd, wireless service providers must file their annual certification of compliance with the FCC's hack requirements. Now moving on to the National Deafblind Equipment Distribution Program. On June 12th, we announced the allocations for all 56 states and territories about their funding for the new funding year. June 1st of 2019 to June 30th of 2020. It's a $10 million allocation total, and we also selected 2 new program operators for states that identified a lack of operators in their states. In Kentucky, we selected the Helen Keller National Center for the Deafblind Youth, and for Illinois, we selected the Lester and Rosaline Annixter Center. There is a division there called the Chicago Hearing Society, and we have named them as the NDB EDP operator for the state of Illinois. Moving on, and again, I know it's a lot of information to cover. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask us after, and Elliot is going to speak after me as well to talk a little bit more about TRS. Video programming. There are three parts to video programming. First, general accessibility, second, video description, and third, captioning. And I'm going to start first with the general accessibility of video programming. On July 10th, we adopted a new rule around children's educational television programming. We now allow 52 hours, or up to 52 hours of children's programming to be short form rather than full length, up to 52 hours, and we required that stations, television stations, must have their children's programming on their primary program stream. However, we do allow up to 13 hours per quarter of regularly scheduled weekly programming on multicast streams. And what that means for accessibility is that we have implemented a commitment to release a public notice on September 21st on the impact that those rules have on video description and captioning accessibility for such programming. The second piece for general access is Google Fiber. Google Fiber is a provider of high-speed broadband internet and multi-channel video programming in residential and business for both residential and business customers in some metropolitan areas. Google Fiber has asked for a limited waiver for two things. First, two things in video programming. First, they want in December of 2019, the potential to adjust the presentation and display of captioning, which must be auditorily accessible. They're asking for an extension to December of 2019 to comply with that rule. And starting December 19th of 2020, there is a requirement that information must be audibly accessible for the display of configuration options and activating set-top box configuration options. And both of these extensions were granted in September. So it's a very limited scope waiver. And Google Fiber must provide a status report to the FCC on January 2nd of 2020 and June 1st of 2020 to let us know about their progress towards meeting those functionally accessible goals. Now, for video description, June 13th, we released a public notice to invite your comments about USA Network's request for a limited waiver for the Commission's rules to require certain pay TV companies to provide 50 hours of video description per calendar quarter on top of the 5 non-broadcast networks, whether they are provided during prime time or as children's programming, and an additional 37.5 hours of video description per calendar quarter between 6 a.m. and 11:59 p.m. USA Network asked for a waiver of those two requirements and indicated that they will air at least 1,000 hours of described programming each quarter, regardless or not of this waiver, and that they will describe at least 75% of any newly produced non-live programming that they show between 6 a.m. And midnight of the quarter. So it is a limited waiver until June 30th of 2021, and that waiver request would then apply to all other non-broadcast networks that meet those conditions. The comment period for that petition is already closed. We are expected to release an order soon on that request for waiver. Thank you to all of you who filed comments about that waiver request. Now, for captioning. Two things to report out on captioning. First is that on June 21st, we released a public notice to invite your comments on Pluto TV's request for a temporary waiver of the FCC's rules to require captioning of video programming delivered through Internet Protocol, or IP, on certain platforms only, where users can access Pluto TV's content. That comment period is open until November 7th, so we welcome your comments on that petition, and thank you for those of you who have already filed comments. Second, on August 14th, we invited your comments through public notice about a petition for declaratory ruling and rulemaking that was filed by the Coalition of Consumer and Academic Organizations about live captioning quality metrics and the use of automated speech recognition technology. The comment period will close October 30th. Two more things for me to report out. Thank you for your time and attention. I know it's a lot because we have been doing a lot. We've been very, very busy. Modern communications. Many of you, I believe, have served on a working group that was talking about interoperable video calling, or IVC as it is called, under the North American Numbering Council, or NANC, also called NANCY, has released now a final report recognizing the recommendations for interoperable video calling, or IVC, to allow for consumers to be able to make and receive video calls between 10-digit telephone numbers. In that report, which is available online, they have identified some unresolved issues, and I feel it is likely that they will be continuing their work to make video calls interoperable for all 10-digit numbers. Last, broadband. Many of you have contacted our office concerned about how broadband availability is impacting people with disabilities' access to telecommunications. On August 6th, we released a report and order and second further notice of proposed rulemaking to better identify the gaps in broadband coverage across the United States. That report and order implements a new broadband deployment data collection. And we also invited your comments about how we develop location-specific data to identify homes and small businesses that have or do not have access to broadband services. The comment period closes October 7th. So those are just a few highlights of the work that we have done, and I want to join Patrick and Diane in thanking all of you for the work that you have been doing. It really takes all of us to help move mountains here. And if you have questions, please know that Elliot and I will be happy to answer any of these after Elliot finishes his piece of our report out on telecommunications relay services. Thanks again.
Okay, thank you, Susie. Wait, is this on? Yeah, it's on. All right, this is Elliot. For those of you who were just recently at either the NASRA conference at TRS Advisory Council or TEDPA, this will be familiar. So my apologies, because I see several of you around the room. I'm going to start with VRS. On April 30th, CGB granted ZVRS and Purple a limited waiver of the expiration date of the at-home VRS call handling pilot program, and that's through, the waiver is now extended through October 31st. Also, limited waivers were granted of the rules to permit Sorensen Global and Convo to also participate in the pilot program as extended. On May 15th, the Commission adopted the VRS Modernization Report and Order. It permits direct video calling customer support call centers access to the TRS numbering directory. It facilitates call validation by allowing for a query method that makes use of the existing TRS numbering directory, and requires registration of enterprise and public phones with the TRS user registration database. All these rules I just mentioned are subject to Paperwork Reduction Act approval and therefore are not yet effective. The modernization order also prohibits providers from offering or providing to any individual or entity any form of direct or indirect incentives, financial or otherwise, whether express or implied, for the purpose of encouraging individuals to register for or use VRS. This expands upon the prohibitions adopted in the 2008 through 2013 time period. And service-related equipment is exempt from this prohibition as long as providing such equipment is not linked to usage. And this rule became effective on July 8th. Now, on August 19th, Convo filed a petition for clarification of this rule, and on August 29th, CGB released a public notice seeking comment. Comments are due September 30th, and reply comments are due October 15th. We welcome your comments so that we can develop a full record on this matter. Also, the VRS modernization had a further notice of proposed rulemaking, which sought comment on permitting at-home interpreting on a permanent basis, permitting service to new importing users for up to 2 weeks, pending completion of identity verification by the TRS URD administrator. Service during this period will be compensable only if the user's identity is ultimately verified, and requiring whether to require login procedures when using enterprise and public phones. And the comment period for this ended on September 4th. Of course, we will continue to accept written ex parte comments as well as ex parte meetings. Moving on to IPCTS, on April 8th, Hamilton Relay filed a petition for reconsideration of the February 2019 IPCTS Program Management Order with respect to the FCC's exogenous cost recovery guidelines that limit cost recovery to costs that, 1, belong to a recoverable cost category, 2, were not factored into the compensation rates in effect, and 3, would cause a provider's allowable costs plus operating margin to exceed revenues. On June 5th, CGB issued a public notice seeking comment. That formal comment period is closed, and of course we continue to welcome written ex parte comments as well as ex parte meetings. Also, on IPCTS on August 26th, CGB issued 3 separate public notices seeking comment on applications for certification to provide IPCTS filed by VTC Secure, Machine Genius, and Clarity Products. Each applicant proposes to use automatic speech recognition to provide IPCTS. Comments are due September 25th, that's tomorrow. Reply comments are due October 10th. We welcome your comments. I'll also mention that since this PN came out, VTC Secure filed a petition for waiver of certain rules, which it said were inapplicable to the use of automatic speech recognition. You can expect a public notice seeking comment on that soon, possibly as soon as today. So keep your eyes out for a public notice. Moving on to TRS rates, on June 28th, CGB adopted an order establishing per-minute compensation rates, the TRS fund revenue requirement of about $1.4 billion, and a carrier contribution factor of approximately 2.8% for the fund year beginning July 1st and ending June 30th of 2020. Also, very recently, just this past Friday, the Commission released an item that amends the rules to conform the rule definition of TRS to the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, CVAA definition that is codified in Section 225 of the Communications Act, and that finally brings the FCC rules into conformance with the CVAA, although because the Commission and the TRS Fund Administrator are required to follow the statute, this simply, the compensation for calls between different users of different types of TRS have been compensated since the CVAA became law. The item also seeks comment on whether to eliminate the requirement to publish in the Federal Register notice of applications for certification filed by state TRS programs. Notifications would still be filed in public notices and posted on the FCC website. This item also seeks comment on whether to relieve all TRS providers of the requirements to offer consumers their choice of long-distance carrier, known as the Equal Access Rule, and multiple billing options for long-distance calls. Comments are due on 21 days after publication in the Federal Register. Replies will be due 35 days after publication in the Federal Register. That has not yet been published since it was only released on Friday. Also, on August 20th, 2019, CGB extended the equal access and billing options waivers previously granted to Sprint and Hamilton until August 24th, 2020. That will give the Commission a chance to complete the rulemaking proceeding between now and August. That concludes what I have to say about TRS, and of course, Susie and I can answer any questions you may have on these matters.
Thank you very much. I don't see any tent cards up. No questions? Okay. Well, thank you for that great update there, both Susie and Elliot. And I guess now we should move to the next item here. Report and recommendation regarding the availability of television listings of audio-described programming. Carl Richardson, please go ahead. Oh, and I think we should mention too, just as far as recommendations, the template here for us, right, is to have the recommendation read, open discussion on the recommendation, entertain motions regarding the recommendation, vote on those motions if needed, and then vote on the recommendation. And we would vote by going, like we did roll call, by going around and people say what they want to vote. Okay, enough for me. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. Go ahead, Carl. Thanks.
So, hi, my name is Carl Richardson, and excuse me. This recommendation is fairly short and straightforward. Basically, with the 9 entities that are required to provide audio description, and they're doing a great job, and there's more content than ever before, there was some confusion from the blind and visually impaired community what was on where and when. Some folks in the blind and visually impaired community don't even know which 9 entities are required under the CVA to provide it, and they don't know what shows are on where and when. So this recommendation hoped to streamline it so that it is easier for the consumer to watch the shows that are audio described. So it benefits both the provider and that the audience that it was intended for will watch it, and it'll make it easier for the consumer to watch it as well. Basically, there are a couple of points in this recommendation. One, there's some confusion whether it's called audio description, video description. I know in the television industry it's typically called video description, but audio description is used a lot elsewhere, so it was recommended that maybe we try to use one terminology for this called audio description to cut down on confusion. And second, to get the providers, the 9 entities that are required to provide audio description, to maintain up-to-date listings on their website, but also work with third-party aggregators that collect the data to give them accurate and timely information on what shows are being audio described, and to work with the FCC to potentially create an accessible database for not only the blind and visually impaired community, but organizations to pull the data from should they want to share it with their community. I'm going to ask Joel Snyder to read the recommendation.
Thanks, Carl. Thanks, Carl.
Thank you.
Recommendation of the Federal Communications Commission Disability Advisory Committee, described audio TV listings working group. Objective: develop recommendations to foster the provision of reliable information about televised programs with audio description on networks subject to the Commission's description requirements for covered networks, such as the airtime of such programs and the method to identify such programs and timeliness, promptness, and accuracy of such listings. 1. Whereas audio description is audio narrated description of a television program's key visual elements. These descriptions are inserted into natural pauses in the program's dialogue or other critical sound elements. Audio description makes television programming more accessible to individuals who are blind or visually impaired. 2. Whereas audio description on television is typically presented on the secondary audio channel. The secondary audio channel also provides audio tracks in languages other than the native language included on the primary audio channel. Pursuant to the Commission's rules, the covered networks are required to provide a certain amount of programming with audio description. 3. Whereas the described audio TV listings working group was established in part to provide the Commission with recommendations on how covered networks and other ecosystem parties may effectively provide information about audio-described programming in a manner that is readily available to all TV viewers and accessible to and usable by individuals who are blind or visually impaired. 4. Whereas consumers and video providers would benefit from a uniform nomenclature for program listings that include audio description. However, various terms are commonly used, including audio description, descriptive video service, or DVS, video description, creating confusion when searching for programs with audio description online and on program guides. 5. Whereas we believe consumers of audio description are most familiar with the term audio description because it is used most often in other contexts such as film, movies, DVDs, performing arts, museums. The term audio description has been the primary term of art for orally described content since its inception. Furthermore, audio description is used by most federal agencies, such as the Department of Justice, in their regulations of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the National Park Service, the Department of Health and Human Services, and others. Consistent nomenclature is critical to the ongoing effort to build awareness of audio description and to help ensure consumers can find described content. 6. Whereas the use of inconsistent logos to visually indicate the presence of audio description creates confusion. The logo, consisting of 2 letters in bold black type, A, with its left side tilted toward the right, and D, with 3 curved lines to its right, matching the curve in the letter D, indicating audio description, is used worldwide. It was developed in the 1980s by the National Endowment for the Arts and the Graphic Artists Guild and is in the public domain. 7. Whereas in 2012, the Video Programming Access Advisory Committee, VPAAC, report noted, quote, the industry members of the VPAC understand that it is possible for the principal television programming information distributors, Tribune Media Services and ROVI, to include description information in their program data distribution. Therefore, they recommended that, quote, to the extent that provide information to one or both principal television programming information distributors about their television listings, broadcast and non-broadcast networks that are required to provide described programming identify in a timely manner which of their listed programs include description. See the April 9th, 12th, second report of the VPAC on the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act of 2010. 8, whereas the Commission, in its 2014 report to Congress, described the concerns of commenters about the lack of publicly available information about described television programs and, quote, commended the efforts of covered entities and consumer groups to inform consumers about which programs contain video description through their websites, encouraged industry to coordinate with program guide developers to include information about which programs are described as part of mainstream program information resources to provide consumers with current and accurate information on described programming. Further, in the 2016 Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, noting concerns raised by commenters about fragmented described television program information and difficulty in finding information in programming guides. 9, whereas both consumers and video program providers would benefit from reliable and easier to find information about programs that include audio description, including scheduled air times. Unfortunately, consumers of audio description report difficulty in finding such information, noting that electronic program guides do not consistently display which shows are described, while industry members report that they are able to find audio described programming through their standard program listings platforms. Further, consumers assert that individuals must search multiple network websites, browse a third-party website, or call into a phone system to find a schedule of audio-described programs. 10, whereas a reliable source of information about programs with audio description would allow video program providers to efficiently demonstrate the hours and nature of such accessible content they provide. Now, therefore, it is, 1, recommended that the Commission, as soon as practicable, use the term audio description to refer to described video programs when discussing or listing audio described programming, and that the Commission encourage other entities to do the same as a best practice. 2, recommended that the Commission, as soon as practicable, use the publicly available logo created by the National Endowment for the Arts and the Graphic Artists Guild, and that the Commission encourage other entities to consider adding the logo as a best practice when feasible. 3, recommended that the Commission encourage greater uniformity and consistency in the provision of information regarding the availability of audio-described programming, including A, the Commission maintain up-to-date links on its audio description webpage to websites where audio description programming information can be found, and B, the Commission encourage broadcast and non-broadcast networks to include information and links on their websites to provide information about audio description and when audio-described programs are airing, including but not limited to links to the FCC audio description webpage and other third-party audio description listing sites. And C, the Commission encourage cable, satellite, fiber, and streaming video programming services to develop methods to filter, search, or discover programs that are audio described in their electronic program guides. If not achievable, that the cable, satellite, fiber, and streaming video programming services provide prominent links to sites where this information can be found. And 4, recommended that the Commission encourage all networks, channels, cable, satellite, fiber, streaming, and other services that provide video programming with audio description to provide timely, accurate program listings, including, to the extent feasible and or within their control, on aggregator services, on their websites, and in program guides.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we can open it for discussion. I see your hand up, Carl.
First, I neglected, first of all, Joel, you need to take a breath, I'm sure. First, I neglected to thank the working committee. They were 17 members of the committee, and I want to thank them all. It was a truly collaborative effort. But in particular, I want to thank the writing group who put that recommendation together, which consisted of Joel Snyder from Audio Description Associate, Paul Schroeder of IRA, Townsend Davis of ABC, Josh Peeler of NAB, Larry Walkie of NAB, and I hope I didn't forget anybody. Did I forget anybody? And also assistance from Will Shell from the FCC. So I just want to thank the writing group. They worked hard to find a recommendation that everybody could live with. Thank you.
Hi. Please go ahead. Tim Cregan, U.S. Access Board.
Hi. Good morning, everyone. Sorry for the delay in getting here. I discovered Metro's wonderful reliability. After the 20-minute stop underground, I decided to walk the 6 blocks. So I'm very glad to be here today, and I'm very glad to see this particular proposal before the committee. My hat's off to Joel and Lisa and the other members of the committee. I would like to point out for the information of the committee at large, paragraph 5, where you're talking about the use of the word audio description, and you're specifically referencing the use by other federal agencies. Those of you who were involved in the recent refresh of the Section 508 standards, which were published in the Federal Register in 2017 and are required to be used by all federal agencies since 2018, and which are also gaining increasing use in the private sector as a means of creating accessible online content, also use the term audio description. I recommend the committee, we not only have a definition of audio description, we also have provisions in our hardware section addressing audio description controls. So I agree with this. I would suggest you might want to amend paragraph 5 to make notice of the fact that Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act does also specifically reference audio description. Thank you.
Great. Well, I do see your 10 card up, Dennis, but go ahead and then we can talk about the motion. Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of questions from Sprint regarding the recommendations. These were well written, so we really appreciate the opportunity to review these. One question we had was that there was the language used was more of a recommendations and encourage, but nothing about mandating or stronger language. Was there a reason for simply recommending and having that level of recommendation encouragement rather than mandating or stronger language?
Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, I think we wanted to come up with something that, I don't want to go into too much detail, but we wanted to come up with something that everybody could live with. I think there were some on the committee that felt like if we said must do it, that there might be some opposition. So that's why we use the word recommendation.
Sure. Go ahead, Dennis.
All right. Thank you. The second question I have was, it wasn't really clear to us if the listings are sufficiently clear that these listings be accessible to people who are blind and low vision. I mean, it seemed like that was an assumption. I don't know if it needed to be spelled out in there specifically to be. It was accessible to people who are blind and low vision. Do we feel that was sufficiently spelled out?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Carl.
I don't know. Do I feel that it's sufficiently spelled out to say that it must be accessible? Is that the question?
Yes.
Yeah, I do, but I mean, that's certainly up for debate on the floor today, but I feel like we said that it must be accessible to the blind and visually impaired community.
Great.
but I don't want to speak on behalf of everybody.
Okay, great. Well, the next person in the queue, Isidore, go ahead.
This is Isidore with National Black Deaf Advocates. My question, and I'm trying to understand if this proposal is going to improve the access for people with who are deafblind, essentially, people who have both visual and auditory disabilities. So I'm not sure if this will help improve the access for people who are deafblind, if anyone can speak to that.
Do you want to take that, Carl? It's up to you.
I don't know how to answer that because I think you might be right. It probably doesn't. If you're profoundly deaf and blind, it probably not going to help them watch shows with audio description. But there's a wide range of there's moderate levels of deaf blindness. I, for instance, have Usher syndrome, and I have a dual sensory loss, and I consider myself deaf-blind, and I do partake in audio description. So I think we also have to keep that in mind as well.
And Joel, is that like kind of an answer, or do you have a separate?
Yes,
Okay, go ahead.
yes, it is. Yeah, I agree with Carl with respect to the programming itself, but as to the point that we encourage listings on websites and in other sites, other areas that are accessible to people who are deaf and people who are blind and deaf-blind, I think that may address the concern. I'm not absolutely certain about it, and there are others here with more expertise that could address that. But my understanding is if a website is accessible, having this information more prominently listed on websites will help.
Okay, thank you. So Paul has put his card up in the queue, and and then Jeff, I think after Paul. I don't see anyone else here.
Hi, Paul Schrader with IRA. I want to comment on a couple of points. I think no problem with Mr. Cregan's recommendation. I suspect to add it would be the regulations implementing 508, not the actual text of the law, to whereas 5. So I'm sure we could probably consider that a friendly amendment, but you guys let me know what your structure is on that. I think for the provision of adding accessible for individuals who are blind or low vision, or however we want to word that, probably also would be I'm assuming would be considered a friendly amendment and would make sense to add. And I do think that would also likely include the ability for individuals who are deafblind to be able to access information. Remember that the scope of this recommendation was not about the nature of audio description, about how it's provided, how it's done. It was about information about programs with audio description. So we were working to stay within that scope. And I think the last thing I would say is we were working with, as good as the CVAA is, its description language is probably not as strong as some of us might have liked it to be, or as comprehensive as some of us might have liked it to be. So there's not a lot of provisions within the CVAA about program information with audio description. And so there's not a lot of hooks to hang mandates on. But hopefully, as Carl pointed out, we have crafted a recommendation that is so sensible as to be easily implemented by the entities, and we had several representatives from the broadcast and cable entities on the committee and work group who, I won't speak for them, but certainly we had a lively debate about what could be done in order to make this information more available to individuals. And I think we've tried to craft a balanced set of recommendations that can be followed. Hopefully the commission will take action on a few of the points we've asked, but even if it doesn't, we would certainly hope that the entities covered would take action to make it much easier to identify audio described programs in various ways. Thanks.
Thank you. And Jeff, I saw your card. You still have a comment, correct? Okay.
Should I stand up or? Okay. I am Jeff Rosen from Convo. I do want to applaud this group for their wonderful work and this important step forward that I fully support. I am a deaf advocate myself, and I have had many struggles with captioning over the years, and I do see a parallel. It is important to take steps forward and make progress here. What I did want to mention is that I know the scope of this has been quite limited, but I'm not sure that this should be limited exclusively to television. We are seeing different programming show up on different types of media streams, such as YouTube and Facebook, which is out of television programming. I see that this is more of a recommendation to encourage, but I think it may be worth considering that type of new media programming in that sort of frame. I don't know that I have anything to add here, but I did want to ask the chair and the committee if you did consider that type of new programming, and how would you discuss that and help to inform us about that sort of new programming?
Great. Go ahead, Carl. Thanks.
So it was discussed briefly, but it was also pointed out that the FCC currently has no jurisdiction over those new media, such as streaming services and things like that. So it was felt at this time that we could not address it, but maybe in the future that it might be something else we could look at.
Great. Thank you. And Tim, I see you have a comment. And then, unless...
This is a different issue, but I don't think anyone's... Oh.
So, sorry, Tim, before you go, too, I would just make sure, Elliot, your comment isn't like an answer, because I wondered if FCC does want to... Okay.
Tim can go first.
Okay, go ahead, Tim.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Am I live? Thank you. Thank you. This is a different issue. Again, since it strikes me that the intent of this is to provide uniformity and a common understanding of audio description through the use of the terminology, for example. I had a question about the logo recommendation in that I read what was in here, and it talked about, under paragraph 6, it has a description of it. It would be helpful if we could be provided a graphic of what this is. Also, I'm just curious, in the recommendation it says that it's a publicly available logo created by the National Endowment for the Arts and Graphic Writers Guild. Were there other logos that were considered and rejected? What was the reasoning behind it? I'm just curious as to why this particular logo was recommended over others. Is there any background or history to that? Thank you.
Thanks. It looks like you have an answer, Joel.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Thanks, Tim. That's a great question. First, with regard to getting you a graphic of the logo, we can certainly do that. Will, maybe you can help us get something posted on the website or something like that. I mean, it's readily available, and we'll certainly get that posted or send it out as an email to all committee members, something, whatever. I'll be guided by what Will suggests on that. And yeah, I was at the National Endowment for the Arts as a director for just about 20 years during the period in the, I want to say, late 80s, early 90s, after WGBH began doing, or about the same time when WGBH began providing audio description under a trademark name, DVS. The National Endowment for the Arts was approached by a number of folks who felt like, well, there should be a standard public domain logo for audio description. And I was on that committee that developed the A with the left side tilted toward the right, and then the 3 curved lines matching the curve in the D to its right. I don't recall any other particular logos being considered. Certainly in the intervening period, in fact, in my book, The Visual Made Verbal, I list about 10 different logos that I've collected from around the world, including an eye with a slash through it and other kinds of logos. But don't believe at the time the NEA and the Graphic Artists Guild that any of those were available or had been tried yet. So if that answers your question.
Okay, thank you. So I see Elliot and then Tony, and I should mention we're scheduled to take a break at 10:10. We're a little past that, so we probably ought to figure out motions and voting on this recommendation at some point, but I just mentioned that very quickly. Please go ahead.
Okay. This is Elliot. I was doing a little wordsmithing while we were having this discussion to sort of try and help along the friendly amendments. So I was going to, these are just suggestions. It's up to the DAC, of course, to decide what to do. But in the fifth whereas clause, if you go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down where it says the Department of Justice in their regulations of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and there's a comma, then insert there the United States Access Board in its implementation of Section 508, comma. Should I repeat that, or do you have that? So that was one suggestion. My other suggestions are for the other friendly amendment. In the third recommendation, the second line, where it says consistency in the provision of information, insert the word accessible between of and information. And then in the fourth recommendation, in the third line, where it says description to provide timely, accurate program listings, after accurate, insert a comma, and then insert the word accessible. So those are some suggested wordsmithing to take care of the friendly amendments. Of course, those are just suggestions. If anybody has other wording that they think is better, that's fine with me.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh.
Tim.
Tim?
Could you repeat the edits to the recommendations, please? We were trying to write them down and we didn't catch them.
Oh, sure. On whereas clause 5, after where it says Department of Justice in their regulations of the Americans with Disabilities Act, comma, insert the United States Access Board in its implementation of Section 508, comma.
Okay, and I would say.
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
Okay,
I mean,
sure.
feel free to make that better.
Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
That.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. And go ahead.
What the edits on?
Great. And we can, we'll work these edits out, I think, to make sure that we get them, but appreciate that. Tony, please go ahead. Thanks for waiting.
Yes. Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Hi, Tony.
Sorry.
Tony Stevens with the American Council of the Blind. First off, again, as one of the consumer organizations here at the table, along with NFB, I don't want to speak on behalf of them, but on behalf of ACB, thank you so much for industry and for Carl for leading this. I will not give too much more, other than I know that it was mentioned about, it is why not a shall, but more of an encourage. I believe throughout this whole process, we've made very good, and I've been very pleased with the way that industry has been attentive to the fact that this can bring them more audiences. And at the end of the day, that provides a greater market opportunity for them, which is in a sense the carrot, sort of method in this. And I believe it's well done, and Carl and everyone else that did that. To that end, knowing that we're short on time, may I entertain a motion at that point, I guess, to the chairs? That we move as amended to vote with the friendly amendments. Can we move toward that, or?
Well, I do see Townsend also has his
Okay,
card up.
that's fine.
So would like
I'll
to
yield then.
at least make your comment there, maybe before we proceed there. Go ahead.
Just waiting for the camera.
Thank you. Just a question about adding the word accessible to those recommendations. And I will ask people with greater expertise to weigh in here. I'm not sure what that means. Obviously, the goal here is to make the entire, to make listings more accessible. But what that means in terms of actually making these listings accurate and so on is not clear to me. As I envisioned it, and I should say as an aside, that even in recommended form, this has already prompted our company to find ways to make things clearer and to make things more accurate. And there have been changes behind the scenes that have already pushed us to come closer to what this is recommending. So even in recommended form, you should feel that this is already having an impact. But to come back to just the amended, the addition of the word accessible means what exactly? Because as I'm picturing this, it will mean that websites will have information in textual form or perhaps in the form of links that will lead to other text. But does accessible mean something other than that? I throw it to the group before we add that.
Well, yeah, I see there's quite a queue here. Yeah, Tim, if you have a response to the question, go ahead. Sure. I see. And then we might just break and resume, I think, because we're past our break. Yeah.
Tim Cregan, U.S. Access Board. In response to Townsend's question about what it means to be accessible. So accessible means that it's conformant with the technical and functional performance requirements in Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act. Specifically, with regard to online content, what it means is that content is consistent with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0, Level A and AA. It means that users of assistive technology will be able to navigate web pages and will be able to retrieve the information and have all the functionality of the pages. So I think that this question, recommendation 3, is talking about the data links, and so it's obviously presupposing that this is online content. So I would make a recommendation that either we do a little more wordsmithing as to where to put in the word accessible, just because of the confusion that Townsend's recommending. That would just be my recommendation, because if you wish the online content to be accessible, I think you need to say that. Because just saying provision of accessible information, depending on the context, people could take accessible meaning I can get my hands on it, I can find it. Whereas the context we're trying to use this in, I believe, is to say that it is accessible consistent with Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act. So I would suggest we take a few moments, maybe as a break, to try and wordsmith this a little better. My recommendation. Thank you.
Right. Thanks very much, Tim, for that. We've just been just making sure here, and we do. I mean, I saw cards up from Pamela, Tom, Tony, and Carl, and we thought, why don't we take that break? Why don't we take that break? But I will not forget that cue.
Actually, can we just do one more, because I think people might need to think about this from the wordsmithing. Can Elliot maybe just read? This is Tom. Sorry. Can Elliot just read the clause 3 of the recommendation where you inserted accessible, just so we know exactly, is it letter A, B, or C? Where are we including it here?
Sure. Yeah, this is Elliot. Happy to do that. It's right in the recommended part with the objective of, therefore, it would apply to all 3 clauses. It says recommended that the Commission encourage greater uniformity and consistency in the provision of accessible information regarding the availability of audio-described programming, including : and then the 3 clauses. So if that doesn't work, and that's fine, then it would then I think it does make sense to do some wordsmithing to insert in each of the 3 clauses as appropriate, and that's probably something appropriate to do during the break and then come back with it.
Right. So this is Tom. I just, from an industry perspective in response to Townsend, I think it does work there because it is, I think, a little bit broader than what maybe Tim was talking about. So if you take it and apply it to all 3, accessible would mean that, it's in accessible form in an electronic program guide, and it's accessible online, so that the web page is marked up correctly, et cetera. So I think accessible in that recommendation just kind of further clarifies, across all 3 that you're going to apply it that way.
Okay. Let's take our break. And how long, are we going to shorten our break, you think? 10-minute break? Okay. See you in, at 10:35 a.m.
Thank you for your help.
Towards your seats, if you would. Head on back.
Yeah. Yeah, we have to. Well, Susie was telling me that we might need to do. Hi, everyone. Oh, it's not on. Susie was saying to me that we need to do a different vote for each amendment. We need to do a different vote for each amendment, apparently. That's what, yeah. I'll make sure with Will, but.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I got almost.
Let me just make a...
All right, is everybody ready? Are we all ready to come back to the table?
Hello, hello, hello. Hi. Hi, everyone. This is Will. Thank you. Hi, this is Will. Thanks. I know we're on a super tight schedule, and we are having a very good discussion. And I'm going to just send this back to the chair to try to get the rest of the discussion out of the group, it looks like the amendment might have been refined and hashed out. So we'll try to get clarification on all of that, and we'll just keep this moving.
One more second.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Yeah. Well, while we give them that second, I've also been, reminded we're on a tight schedule. We want to be done on time. So maybe moving forward, people could keep their comments to a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully that's fair. Are you? Hopefully, Elliot, you can update us on the amendment to the recommendation.
Right, so several of us had a little caucus to do some wordsmithing, and so we'll start with the whereas clause 5. In the same place where we talked about before, where it says Department of Justice in their regulations of the Americans with Disabilities Act, comma, we insert the United States Access Board revised Section 508 standards of the Rehabilitation Act, and then after that, in parenthesis, 2017, comma. Did you get that? Okay. I'll move on to the next one. In the third recommended clause, where it says the consistency in the provision of information regarding, after the word information, insert the words in accessible form. Okay. And then in the fourth recommended clause, where it says description of to provide timely, accurate program listings, after the word listings, insert in accessible form, comma.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, are there any comments on the amendments that Elliot just summarized for everyone, described? So, my question is, there is a comment. Tom. I see Tom's. Oh.
Tom's not in the room.
Oh. Okay. I mean, we yeah. I mean, I apologize. I don't want to forget. We had some people in the queue before we took the break, and I said I won't forget you, and I don't want to forget you. So I had written down Pamela, Tom, Tony, then Carl. Pamela, yes.
I got my answers during the break.
Got it. Okay. Pamela's okay. All right. And Tom is not in the room. Tony. Okay. Tony's okay. Carl.
I'm okay.
Okay. Excellent. So, okay. It would, okay, I'd agree, yeah, I agree. That we can, the question that I was asking Will a moment ago off the mic was whether we had to vote on each amendment, go all the way around the room, with each amendment. But with this document revised, hey, Tom. Your tent card was up, and I did not want to miss any further comment that you might have.
No, all set.
Okay, great. Can we do one vote on the recommendation as amended, like Elliot described?
This is Will. In the effort of efficiency, and because I think this has been pretty clearly worked out by parties during the break, what I'd like to do is take one moment, and if anyone would like us to vote separately on the motion, to please raise their hand or their card. It's no problem to take a vote on the motion itself. It just doesn't appear that anyone is going to object to the motion, but please correct me if I'm wrong. It's no big deal.
Jeff has a comment?
This is okay. I guess I'm not on camera. Okay. Hi everyone. This is Jeff. Robert's Rules of Order say that we should be allowed one vote, which include all the amendments, if a person moves to make a motion and that is accepted for all the amendments, including those friendly amendments, then in that case it would be just one vote. So according to Robert's Rules of Order, that would be the procedural way to go. So I think we can move forward with one vote, if that's all right with everyone here.
Tim.
Thank you. Yeah, I would agree with Jeff. I would just say that in my experience, am I on? Okay, thank you. I agree with Jeff. I was going to say, in my experience, when you have debate of this matter, what we've been in is we've been discussing the original amendment as proposed. Then there have essentially been motions for friendly amendments made from the floor. Then we've been having discussion of the friendly amendments. Then typically what happens is the parties, there's a motion to call the question to end debate. And then there would be a motion that we would vote on the friendly amendments as proposed. Then the friendly amendments, if they pass, you're done. If the friendly amendments fail, then you're back to the original language of the original proposition. So I think that's the way Roberts would lay it out, each step sequentially.
Okay, yes, that sounds like a plan. So we would entertain a motion to close the debate next, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Does anyone want to make that motion? Linda?
Hi, this is Linda. Hi, this is Linda Vanderloop, and I move to close the debate.
Great.
And then I second her motion.
Okay. The debate is closed.
Great.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Let's take a vote.
So now we can take a vote.
Yep.
As for the amendment.
A motion to vote on the amended.
Right. We need a motion to vote.
I believe Tony already. I was just going to say, I believe Tony Stevens already asked for a motion to vote.
That is
before the
true.
break.
That is true. Thank you. Does someone want a second? Tone? Okay, second. Great. Thanks, Paul. So now we can vote.
Please.
Okay. Should we just go to the left here?
I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
Yep. Starting, who's next to you, Elliot?
Darlene Parker.
Darlene.
Starting with Darlene.
Darlene Parker with the National Captioning Institute votes yes. Approves.
Tom Litkowski, Comcast, votes yes.
Michael Maddox Sorensen votes yes.
Michael Strecker with Clear Captions votes yes.
Dixie Ziegler with Hamilton Relay votes yes.
Shelley Blakeney, T-Mobile, yes.
Tony Stevens with the American Council of the Blind, yes.
Townsend Davis, ABC Disney, yes.
Sam Yale, Level Access votes yes.
Everett Bacon, National Federation of the Blind, votes yes.
Kate Jones with Federal Emergency Management Agency, pass.
Tim Criggin, U.S. Access Board, ex officio, pass.
Lisa Hamlin, Hearing Loss Association of America, yes.
Maria Diaz-Zicapta, yes.
Pam Holmes, Ultratech, yes.
Brian Traeger, National Technical Institute for the Deaf, voting yes. U.S. Department of Education, ex officio, I have to pass. Christian Vogler, Gallaudet University Technology Access Program, votes yes. Zainab Al-Kepsi, National Association of the Deaf, voting yes. TDI votes yes. Jeff Rosen with Convo, voting yes. Greg Leibach, CSD-VRS, votes yes.
Deafblind Citizens in Action votes yes.
Becky Rosenthal with NASRA, voting yes.
Gee, let me think about it. No, Carl Richardson with the City of Boston votes yes.
Ian Dolner with Verizon votes yes.
Sarah Miller, American Foundation for the Blind votes yes.
Maria Kirby Apple votes yes.
Linda Vanderloop, AT&T, votes yes.
Ira votes yes.
Matt Gersh, CTIA, votes yes.
Heather York of VITAC votes yes.
Dennis Selznick with Sprint votes yes.
Joel Snyder, Audio Description Associates and Audio Description Project, votes yes.
Brian Scarpelli for ACT the App Association votes yes.
Isidore Nyangabo with National Black Deaf Advocates votes yes.
Okay, so the amended recommendation is approved. Great, thanks everyone. So, we have another recommendation now. A report and recommendation regarding real-time text integration with video relay services from point-to-point and relay calls. And I should now turn to Zainab.
This is Zainab speaking. Okay, I am back with more RTT. So first off, I want to thank the members of the working group for their tireless efforts and collaboration on this important topic. For those who are not a part of this working group, I recognize that this topic is very complicated technically. We have developed a list of glossary in terms of technical vocabulary that you can refer to, and I know Will will be happy to share that information with all of you. This may not be clear from the email that was sent to you, but we will actually be voting separately on two separate sets of recommendations. So I'll be reading the first set of recommendations. We will be having a discussion followed by a vote, and then I'll be reading the second set of recommendations. And we'll then be having another discussion followed by another vote. Just to avoid any confusion, I want to make sure that was clear. The first set of recommendations are for point-to-point VP calls, video phone calls. I'll be reading them now. Draft recommendation of the FCC Disability Advisory Committee, RTT VRS Working Group, RTT integration with point-to-point video calls, deaf user to deaf user or deafblind user to deaf user. Whereas the real-time text, RTT, video relay services or VRS, RTT-VRS working group has developed the enclosed use cases. Just so you know, I'm not going to be reading those use cases. You can refer to those on your own. And whereas ITU T.140 defines the character set, it just says to send one character at a time. This is the character for backspace. This is the character for next line, etc. And whereas 3, RFC 4103 specifies how to send T.140 in real-time protocol on IP networks. And 4, whereas RFC 4103 puts individual characters into packets, typically 1 or 2 characters in a packet at a time, but it could be higher, and sends the packets using the real-time transport protocol, RTP. And whereas RFC 4103 specifies the payload type, and whereas RFC 4103 specifies the sequence number so that one knows what packets are in what order, and whereas 7, RFC 4103 optionally specifies the characters per second, CPS, so that the maximum speed at which text characters are transmitted can be controlled, and 8, whereas RFC 4103 specifies the timestamp so that one can understand when the character was typed, and 9, whereas RFC 4103 specifies the marker bit that deals with long pauses, and 10, whereas one loses a small amount of audio packet or video packet, it does not affect overall intelligibility. But with text packet, packet loss is problematic because it could change the meaning of a word and the meaning of the communication. And 11, whereas RFC 4103 requires the use of RFC 2198 replication if redundancy is offered, each character is sent more than once in more than one packet, so that even with a momentary packet loss, the characters will get through to guard against packet loss. And 12, whereas RFC 4103 specifies RFC 2733 forward error connection, which may be used to complement redundancy. And 13, whereas implementations of RFC 4103 may display irretrievably lost characters with suitable replacement characters, such as the Unicode replacement mark, to alert the user of missing text. And 14, whereas implementations of RFC 4103 may display irretrievably lost characters with suitable replacement characters, such as the Unicode replacement mark, to alert the user of missing text. And 15, whereas even with redundancy, there are still occasions when characters are missing, which happens more frequently on networks with long periods of packet loss. In addition to redundancy, the use of negative acknowledgments, or NAC, would allow the sender of packets to store a few small packets for the purpose of retransmission. And 16, whereas NAC through RTCP feedback is covered in RFC 4585. And 17, whereas such a call requires the other side to have RTT-capable equipment. Alternatively, RTT can be converted to instant message forms by buffering and passing on as a SIP message. And 18, whereas users have to know the RTT functionality exists on their video phone for them to be able to benefit from it. And 19, whereas currently there are no technical standards to reference for different modes of RTT to facilitate turn taking and other options that would better support refreshable Braille displays. 20, whereas it would benefit deaf-blind users to set RTT when available as a default feature to be activated when the point-to-point call is established. And 21, whereas deaf-blind users need an alert that the other side has RTT, and similarly, the other side needs an alert informing them of the need to respond in RTT. 22, whereas there is a need for customization of size, color, contrast, etc. on mobile phones and in VRS apps to ensure access for deaf-blind users. And 23, whereas the SOS, or start of text, or ST, stop text functionality in T.140 as a coding extension of T.140 as specified in section 8.7 application control function could be used to send specialized codes to indicate the need for GA at the end of each transmission. Now, therefore, it is recommended, 1, that the Federal Communications Commission, also known as the Commission, initiate a rulemaking to incorporate RTT specifications for point-to-point calls. And 2, recommended further, ITU T.140 serve as the base with IETF RFC 4103 on top of that base, as well as RFC 4585. And 3, recommended further, the Commission consider the need for RTT-capable video phone equipment and software. And 4, recommended further, the rulemaking should reference any future technical standards that would better support refreshable Braille displays and urge development of such standards. 5, recommended further, the VRS providers collaborate on agreed-upon specialized codes for the GA functionality. And 6, recommended further, the rulemaking should reference user customization settings. And 7, recommended further, the rulemaking should reference the Disability Advisory Committee, or the DAC's, December 6, 2016 recommendations on video mail-to-text services. And 8, recommended further, the Commission consider efforts to educate consumers regarding RTT functionalities. And 9, recommended further, the Commission provide an outreach and consumer education program, particularly for deafblind users, in order to encourage consumer utilization. So that concludes recommendation number 1. I can take a breath now, finally. Okay. Any discussion?
Right. Any discussion, comments? None. Shall we vote on this? Does anyone want to move to, do you have a comment or a motion? Tim.
I just have a question.
Okay.
Okay. Hi, Tim Cregan, U.S. Access Board. Thank you for reading out all that lengthy recommendation. My kudos to you. You're right. This is a very complex subject, and certainly the Access Board has been dealing with the issue of real-time text, and this came up during our Section 508 rulemaking. As a matter of fact, we have currently reserved the area of real-time text because we're waiting to see what the FCC is going to do. So I am approaching this as an indicator of what issues that the FCC would potentially be considering. And what it strikes me, okay, reading through the substance of this, so the majority of the provisions, 1 through 21, certainly 1 through 14 is kind of laying out the technical requirements in the reference standards, such as 4103. My question is, when you get into provisions 15, 16, 17, and so forth, they're noting that there are solutions out there or issues that are not actually addressed by standards. So, and I know we had a discussion on this with other iterations of the DAC, where we pointed that real-time text functionality, the idea is you're supposed to have the capability to interrupt each other. And one of the concerns we had, as I recall at that time, was that this was problematic for deafblind users. So I guess what I'm getting out of this is the recommendation is going to be recommending that there should be some work towards addressing a user protocol, I guess, for users, particularly for users who would need the sequential functioning of real-time text. I'm just trying to get a sense of what this is encompassing. And so I guess my question, is it considered that this is something that, if it were incorporated in a rulemaking, it would be like a question that the FCC would put out to say, how do people recommend that we address this? Or rather than saying, because it's talking about future standards that may be developed. So I guess what I'm trying to think about is in your regulatory toolkit, you have a lot of different things you can do. And sometimes you can't regulate something because there's either no information or there's no standard to reference. So sometimes what you do is you agree upon a set of industry may agree on a set of protocols. So I guess what I'm trying to get a sense of, is that kind of what's within the potentials of these, of the recommendations of this group? Because I understand that part of this is incorporated in technical standards that address real-time text. What we seem to be talking about is the user behavior and the understood user behavior, which is not currently regulated. So would this be in the nature of recommendations for user behavior or a set of best practices? Or I'm just trying to get a sense of where this is going. Thank you.
Great. Go ahead, Dana. Thanks.
This is Zainab speaking. I appreciate that question. That's actually a very good question. Now, we are recommending that the commission look into this, and at the same time, that the providers work together to develop those specialized needs. Does that answer your question?
So, okay, so I know this is a very complex issue, and it's got a human component and it's got a technical component. And if I understand what I think you're saying, what you're saying is the recommendation would be that there would be multiple approaches to solving this problem. There would be not only a recognition of the existing technical standards, but I'm assuming, so recommendation 6 talks about consider the impact on research into possible methods of routing such calls. So what I'm getting is that when you say that they should address this issue further, that the recommendation includes things as research, and it could encompass things like focus groups and best practices, and it would be stuff that would be developed through the cooperation of both consumers and the FCC and industry? Is that where we're going with this? I'm just trying to get a sense of it, the big picture. Thank you.
This is Zainab speaking. I think that Susie wanted to answer that directly, but really the point here is that we are listing out these standards, but we recognize that there are severe gaps and important gaps to recognize, specifically related to the accessible needs of deafblind consumers. So the point here is, by incorporating those standards, that doesn't suffice by itself. We need to work together, make sure there's a lot of collaboration going on to make sure these are actually realized. With that, Susie, I believe, wanted to add something directly.
Thank you, Tim. You brought to mind what we did with real-time texts report and order here at the Commission, in which we added language there to ensure that the requirements evolve with modernizing, emerging technologies. So, for example, we would say, this standard, whatever standard, or its successor. So that could potentially be a friendly amendment to ensure that we don't become stuck with what is today's current standard and as these standards evolve, because this is consistent with how our orders have been worded to make sure that we don't get frozen in time. So that's just a suggestion that successor could be a word to consider that would help those requirements breathe and adapt with modernizing requirements and standards and best practices and so forth.
Great, thank you. I see Linda and then Paul have their cards up. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Linda Vanderloop, AT&T. This really is a complex issue, and there's a lot of of different pieces and a lot of different organizations. My understanding was that this recommendation was really focused on the relay service providers, and then the other recommendation was the service providers like AT&T. So as we talk about this, can we make sure that we clarify when we say collaboration and between providers, just make sure it's clear when we're talking about relay service providers, all service providers, or specifically telephone service providers. That's.
This is Zainab speaking. The document in the recommendation section already specifically states VRS providers because this is related to point-to-point calls. And as you mentioned, the next document, we do specifically mention both groups, both VRS providers and internet carriers. I hope that answers your concern. And then going back to Susie's suggestion, I would be absolutely very amenable to that suggestion, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. Paul?
Paul Schrader, IRA. I just wondered if we, about items 3 and 4 in the recommended text, the need for RTT-capable video phone equipment and a future standard around support for refreshable Braille displays. I'm not clear what that actually means in terms of rulemaking suggestions or recommendations, particularly related to future standards, because I don't know what a rule would do with reference to referencing something that doesn't actually exist.
I know we're, as you might have seen on the agenda, sorry to pause discussion there, folks, but as you might have seen on the agenda, I know we expect the chairman to join us.
Yeah.
I think
so
he's here.
this is this is Will.
Is he behind the pillar?
If the chairman's here, please come on to the front. And then we can all ignore what Paul was saying and forget about it.
I was thinking the chair would answer my question, actually, because I know he can. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, thanks.
Paul, I especially liked your comments when you said, we can't figure out what's going on with this rulemaking. Welcome to my world. That's but I apologize for imposing on your deliberations, but I just wanted to say good morning, welcome back, and thank you for your, so many old friends and new. And thanks to all of you for your work over the past several months during this third term of the Disability Advisory Committee, or DAC, as we call it, rather harsh acronym. But the FCC, though, is truly grateful for the work you have put in on these issues during the most recent term. And of course, the goal here is one that we all share, which is extending to people with disabilities all of the promise of the digital age, access to telecommunications services and products. Now, at the inaugural meeting of this DAC back in April, we gave you a few critical tasks. First, we asked you to make recommendations to address the challenge of integrating real-time text with video relay services. And I can say that we've been especially interested in how that integration will impact effective communications for Americans who are deaf or hard of hearing, or who may have other disabilities. And as our previous work might indicate, we believe very much in RTT, and I had a chance to see this in action with Dr. Vogler at Gallaudet some time ago. As you know better than most, RTT is an accessible text-based solution, and to me at least, it needs to be one of the choices that is available to ensure effective communications. And so we look forward to learning more about the DAC's recommendations on this topic. The second task we gave you was to develop a set of best practices for television providers to ensure easy access to listings of their audio-described program offerings for millions of Americans who are blind or visually impaired, and to ensure the availability of reliable information about whether televised programming is audio described. We eagerly look forward to your recommendations on this subject. And I would say parenthetically that this is a very important topic across the country. Just last week, I was in Lawrence, Kansas, where I had a chance to visit Kansas Public Radio. And one of the things that they have is a very innovative program in which literally hundreds of volunteers, 450 currently, come in and audio describe a whole variety of programming. And one of the things that was surprising to me is that they have gotten incredible feedback from Kansans, from my home state, with disabilities. And so just know that these efforts really make a big difference to consumers across the country in ways big and small. Also, I want to say thank you for your engagement to help inform the Commission's work on enhancing and expanding accessible services and programs over the last several months. And to give you a few examples, the FCC recently tackled some important relay service issues, including decisions to expand video relay service, or VRS, user access to direct video communications. We improved access and service quality for VRS, evaluated applications to provide IP CTS, and streamlined the telecommunications relay service, or TRS. And we also addressed some questions of cost and efficiency of service and waste and potential fraud in order to enhance, not limit, the viability of the TRS program. And in turn, consumers who rely on relay services, we want them to have full and reliable access to those services on a long-term basis. Next, the FCC's National Deaf-Blind Equipment Distribution Program also has made progress in certifying new program participants in Illinois and Kentucky, to those of you from the Midwest, to ensure the availability of accessible equipment and services to qualified individuals so that they can connect to the outside world. We often get stories about how this program makes a difference, and our old friend Karen Peltz-Strauss, who has forgotten more about this area than I will ever know, has often talked about what a difference it has made in the lives of consumers. We've also done some outreach, strong outreach at the FCC, to make sure that people who might not have the ability to come to these halls will understand the importance we place on these issues. We've met with consumers and industry providers in several venues to stay on top of advances in accessible technologies and services. And we want to encourage people to think outside the box and to work with us to help us understand the challenges that Americans with disabilities have. And speaking of Karen, we, of course, maintain a robust consumer contact point with our Disability Rights Office, which provides multiple channels for all consumers with disabilities or any family or loved ones with those with disabilities to learn about their rights, to get information, to pose a complaint, to express their concerns about many of these issues. I don't want to filibuster in the grand tradition of Washington, but I simply want to say, once again, thank you for the work you are doing. As I travel around this country in big cities and small towns, in the West, the Midwest, the South, and the Northeast, one of the things that you recognize is that consumers are ever more intertwined with technology in their daily lives, and your efforts are so important in making sure that no American is left behind, no matter who you are, what disability you might have, what your orientation is, where you happen to live. None of these things should matter when the question is one of digital equity. And so for all of the work you have done, highly paid, I'm sure, from the FCC, we want to make sure that we recognize the efforts you have put in. The work you've done is not in vain. It goes towards a very, very high cause. And I'm so grateful to call you coworkers in this effort. Thanks, and as always, I apologize for speaking so quickly for our intrepid interpreter.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate that a great deal. Thanks for speaking with us. Okay. Well, Paul, I think you were about to make a comment.
I'll just, Paul Schrader with IRA, if I could just restate. So the question relates to item 3 and 4 of the recommendation, when it says consider the need for video phone, I'm wondering to what end in a rulemaking would that be involved? And 4, reference to standards around refreshable braille display, the future development of those standards. I get the second part of that clause, which says encouraging the development of those standards, I guess. But I'm not sure what the point of that, both of these provisions in a rulemaking would be. If somebody could help me understand what is intended there, that would be helpful.
This is Zainab speaking. Both excellent questions, Paul. I'll answer the second one first, if I might, in regards to recommendation 4. As you already noticed, the point here is to develop these standards. And again, like I mentioned, our goal is not to stop at the standards level. And this is not the only thing we're referring to in this document. We're thinking about the future. We're thinking about our constant growth and evolution. Now, in terms of your first question, I put that there to make sure that the point is not overlooked in this document. Without RTT-capable equipment, using RTT is simply not possible. So you have to look at both RTT functionalities and also consider the equipment capabilities as well. Both sides have to have RTT-capable equipment. So I put that into there to make sure that the FCC considers that in the development of the record.
Thanks. I see Jeff. Jeff has her card up. Go ahead.
This is Jeff speaking. I'm very, oh, excuse me. I'm waiting for the camera to be on me. Oh, I'm camera shy, actually, Jeff says. This is Jeff speaking. I work with Convo, and I was very proud to be a part of this committee. And it's quite a forward-looking group, and I know there's been some resistance to new regulations. And so I think it's important to have a variety of different people involved in those discussions. I agree that the heart of this recommendation is not limited to what we have today, but also it allows for further growth in the future. I don't think we need any amendments. I think it's well-intentioned. I know it's a very technical document, but I would move for the FCC to do whatever it will in terms of its rulemaking. And I just wanted to clarify one point in regards to equipment, as Zainab brought up earlier. Equipment does not specifically refer to hardware, but also incorporates software, rather, if I'm not mistaken. Zainab has a hand raised. This is Zainab speaking again. I will review the language again. It says recommended further that the FCC consider the need for RTT-capable video phone equipment and software. So both hardware and software are mentioned in the recommendation.
Okay. Well, oh, I see Michael has his card up.
Hi, Michael Streck with Clear Captions here. I kind of feel like I'm back in high school, sitting in the corner of the room a little bit, but just a couple of questions or clarification I'm asking on recommendations 8 and 9. Specifically, are the recommendations focused, for example, the Commission considering efforts to educate consumers regarding RTT functionalities? Is that education specific to point-to-point calls and video relay service? Or is the recommendation being that they educate consumers regarding RTT in general to all consumers across the board? The recommendation is pretty broad right now. And really, the same question applies to number 9. Is that outreach specific to deafblind users and point-to-point VRS calling scenarios, or again, very general and broad in terms of any type of outreach around RTT to the deafblind community?
This is Zainab speaking. A good question. As was already explained in the first set of recommendations, this is, as I already explained, this is the first set of recommendations that specifically talks about point-to-point calls. However, any outreach regarding point-to-point calls would also have an impact on VRS, because as a consumer, if I see that the RTT options are there, I would use that for both point-to-point and for VRS. Does that answer your question?
Mike Strecker here again. Yes and no, in the sense of the way it reads, at least number 8 right now, just recommends efforts to educate consumers. It doesn't say which consumers. Is it cell phone consumers, mobile consumers, VRS? I think my recommendation might be to just add the definition of VRS consumers, or something that at least focuses it into the area that it wants the education to take place.
Zainab speaking. I understand where you're coming from, but I also would ask you to think about the second set of recommendations. As you will see in that second document, we talk about RTT capabilities not just with interpreters, but also using hearing parties as well. So I think RTT education would be for all types of consumers, so that we're able to accomplish what we are trying to in this document.
Okay, I see no further cards up. Oh, I apologize, Greg. Please go ahead, yeah.
Hello, sorry I'm a little late to the game, but I was a part of this working group, so I have to contribute, make a comment for this. This recommendation speaks to the obligation of VRS providers, but for the record, I want to point out that oftentimes when it comes to producing technology, VRS technology, oftentimes third-party manufacturers are involved, various vendors. So there's several players in the process. So I know this is a call to initiate a rulemaking on RTT functionality. But for the sake of the record, I'd like to say that we would consider several players in this proceeding, not just VRS providers.
Right. Oh, I think Zainab has a comment or response.
This is Zainab speaking. I think that's a very important point, Greg. Was there an amendment you wanted to make, or is this just something you're stating for the record? And Greg's saying that's just for the record. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I did want to make sure we get a hand. Again, I don't see any other content cards up. Get a handle on what amendments, if any, have been made here for the resolution. Are there? I know Susie mentioned something, and you had, Zainab had said that you were amenable to that. Or is that a motion? And I believe that was a slight text change to reflect developing emerging technology. Do I have that right? Is there a text we want to talk about? Yeah.
This is Zainab speaking. My understanding was that and correct me if I'm wrong, Susie, but this is at all times when referring to the standards, we would add a successor, excuse the interpreter, successor would be added in the document.
Okay. Are there any comments on that? Oh, hey, go ahead, Elliot.
Yeah, this is Elliot. I'm just wondering if it's really necessary in the whereas clauses, because the whereas clauses is talking about the state of things as they are right now. So maybe we only need to add or its successor in the second recommended clause, and that might be sufficient, because that, the recommended clauses are forward-looking as opposed to successor, as opposed to the whereas clauses, which are just stating things as they are.
Okay. Go ahead.
This is Zainab speaking. That works for me.
Oh, I apologize. Christian has a comment or card up there. Go ahead.
Christian speaking from Gallaudet University. I'm looking at recommendation number 2, and I have to honestly admit that I'm struggling a bit in how to best incorporate this phrase, or successor. So you mentioned 3 technological standards working together. Where would you put that word successor? I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this clearly.
This, Elliot, let me just read the way I would suggest it. We could always do more wordsmithing. But 2, recommended further, ITU T.140 or its successor serve as the base with IETF RFC 4103 or its successor on top of that base, as well as RFC 4585 or its successor, semicolon, and.
Okay. Zainab has a comment.
This is Zainab speaking. Just to clarify, that's what I assumed that you had meant, but does that clear things up for you, Christian? This is Christian. I have to think a bit more about that. I feel like it may be a little awkward, but I'll have to look into it. This is Zainab speaking. Yeah, but because we have to say, this is the standard, and then the successor, and for each standard we have to specify the successor. This is just for clarification purposes, really.
Tim has a comment?
Excuse the interpreter, for clarity, rather, Zainab said.
Okay, Tim Cregan, U.S. Access Board. So I'm having, I think, some of the same questions that Christian is having. So the intent is to say that we are recommending that the currently existing standards be adopted. And we are also recommending that we be forward-looking. Is that the sense of this? In other words, if new standards come into the marketplace, we should also look at them at that time? Because I guess if you're talking about something that may exist in the future, it seems to me like the point you're trying to make is that you don't want to be wedded to a particular standard. In other words, you want the most current functionality that you can achieve. So I guess that my recommendation would be you break it into 2 different things. As you say, we're recommending this standard currently existing, that standard currently existing, and the committee also recommends that we shall update the standards as they are improved or modified or something like that, because you can't really reference something that doesn't exist yet. So its successor may end up addressing completely different technology, which isn't even addressed here. You know what I'm saying? So in other words, so you could have a technology, let me use a ridiculous example. Let's say you have buggy whips, right? And you've got the best buggy whip out there. It's got horsehair, it's got leather handles, it's got all this stuff. All right, and you have a standard for buggy whips. Well, the world comes along and technology evolves, and buggy whips and their standards are completely irrelevant to transportation. You're talking about automobile keys and fobs and watches and stuff. So it would be a stretch to say that standards for automobile fobs are successors to buggy whip standards, because the technology has completely changed. Your point is not that it's the successor to this technology. Your point is that you're trying to keep current with developments in technology in the field. And I think that tying that to an existing standard, which may go away or become irrelevant, I understand your intent, but I think there's better ways to do it. So my recommendation, again, would be specifically reference the existing standards, and then the committee should put in some kind of language saying, we also recommend that the FCC continually revisit this issue, or that we should continually strive to address the most current, most functional standards available. Thank you.
Susie.
I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to try to make this very quick, but I just wanted to say I threw out that language because it's consistent with what our current practice is at the Commission. Every time you update a standard, you would then renumber that standard. Regardless of whether it was about the same topic, for example, RTT, it would be assigned a new number. So in order to not be frozen to that numbered standard, we use that convention. In a rulemaking, we can then quote that language from the recommendation. So it would give us the flexibility moving forward. But again, I know that, again, we're very quickly running out of time, so I defer to you if you feel that we could add that of our own volition as the Commission later on in a rulemaking proceeding. That's certainly an option as well.
Christian.
This is Christian speaking from Gallaudet University. Thank you. I've clarified some of my difficulties understanding the proposal, so I think some of those issues have been solved. There are really 3 technical standards that are intended to work together, but we cannot predict if in the future there may be replacements to those 3 technologies. There may be new technologies as standards, something else that may become one, for example. However, I think that that's maybe part of the awkwardness of the language, that we assume that all 3 successor standards would be the same in the future, which may not be the case. So I think the recommendation currently talks about T.140 RFC 4103 and 4585, or a set of successors. So if we have to explain that and define that, I think that would be acceptable.
Well, I see a thumbs up from Zainab there. Any further comments? Good? No. Okay. Okay, so we're...
So what's the amendment?
Yeah, let's make sure.
Or...
Oh, go ahead. Hi, Elliot. Go.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hi, this is Elliot. Can I ask Christian to clarify, maybe by reading what his proposed language for recommendation number 2, so that we all understand what it is that's being voted on?
Okay. Recommended further, ITU T.140 serve as the base with IETF RFC 4103 on top of that base as well as RFC 4585, comma, or any set of successors, or rather, any set of successor standards.
Okay. Makes sense? Should we have a motion to close the discussion? I see no further comments. Oh, unless you have a further comment there, Elliot.
No,
oh,
I'm
okay.
sorry.
Oh.
I move to close the discussion.
Okay. Oh, okay, great. The discussion's now closed. Right. Now, we would vote if anyone would make a motion to vote. Tony.
So moved to vote as amended, with the friendly amendment at least.
Right. Isidore just seconded. Excellent. Okay, let's vote.
Darlene Parker, National Captioning Institute, votes yes.
Tom Litkowski, Comcast, votes yes.
Michael Maddox, Sorensen, votes yes.
Michael Strecker with Clear Captions votes yes.
Dixie Ziegler with Hamilton Relay votes yes.
Shelley Blakeney, T-Mobile, yes.
Tony Stevens, ACB, yes.
Townsend Davis, ABC Disney, yes.
Sam Yale, Level Access, votes yes.
Everett Bacon, National Federation of the Blind, votes yes.
Kay Jones, FEMA, pass. Tim Cregan, U.S. Access Board, ex officio, pass.
Lisa Hamlin, Hearing Loss Association of America, votes yes.
Maria Diaz de Capta, yes.
Pam Holmes, Ultratech, yes.
Brian Traeger, National Technical Institute for the Deaf, votes yes. U.S. Department of Education, pass. Christian Vogler, Gallaudet University Technology Access Program, votes yes. Zainab Al-Kepsi, National Association of the Deaf, voting yes. TDI votes yes. Jeff Rosen with Convo, yes. Greg Leibach, CSD VRS, yes.
Jeff Blank, Citizens and Actions votes yes.
And both of them.
Becky Rosenthal, National, yes.
Becky Rosenthal with NASRA votes yes.
Carl Richardson with the City of Boston votes yes.
Verizon votes yes.
Sarah Miller, American Foundation for the Blind, votes yes.
Apple votes yes.
Linda Vanderloop, AT&T, votes yes.
Paul Schrader, IRA votes yes.
Matt Gers, CTIA, yes.
Heather York at VITAC, yes.
Dennis Saltnick with Sprint, yes.
Joel Snyder, Audio Description Associates, Audio Description Project votes yes.
Brian Scarpelli with ACT the App Association votes yes.
Isdor with NBDA votes yes.
Okay. Part 1 of the recommendations are approved. Thanks, everyone. As amended. Back to you, Zainab, for part 2.
This is Zainab speaking. As was brought up, that was only the first set of recommendations, so now we're moving on to the second set of recommendations, so please bear with me here. Recommendations of the FCC Disability Advisory Committee, RTT VRS Working Group, RTT integration with VRS for deafblind or deaf user on a relay call with a hearing caller via a communications assistant, and simultaneously using RTT directly with the hearing caller on the other end. 1, whereas the third generation partnership project 3GPP defines standards for the IP Multimedia Subsystem, IMS, which are based on Internet Engineering Task Force, IETF, Session Initiation Protocol, SIP standards. 2, whereas IMS is a closed system, only carriers with interconnection agreements have access to the signaling and data, so no over-the-top OTT services can touch IMS. And 3, whereas video relay services, VRS providers, created the Provider Interworking Profile, PIP, to allow dial-around and point-to-point calls to work. And 4, whereas the current PIP recommends ITU T.140 and IETF RFC 4103, but does not mandate it. And 5, whereas the Alliance for Telecommunications Industry Solutions, ATIS, has developed standards for wireless real-time text, RTT, interoperability, and RTT emergency calls in the United States to complement the 3GPP standards. And 6, whereas the IETF has begun work on defining a user interface specification for an endpoint device to a VRS provider with consideration of RTT, known as RUM specifications. And 7, whereas NENA-STA-010, or Next Generation 911, has a requirement for public safety answering points, or PSAPs, to support RFC 4103 RTT on any 911 call, including full support for multimedia calls, audio, video, RTT. But 911 RTT implementation is almost non-existent. And 8, whereas the IETF RUM working group is considering specifications that would require support for the underlying emergency call specification, which is RFC 6881, upon which NENA I3 is based. And 9, whereas VRS providers, consumer groups, and researchers have made numerous filings with the FCC expressing concerns with the identical RU profile and/or its development, and the timing and resource allocation of its implementation. 10, whereas interworking IMS to VRS would require VRS providers to implement a full IMS call stack, or at the very least, interwork with IMS at the edge of their network. And RFC 4103 RTT support. And 11, whereas interworking IMS to VRS would require VRS providers to negotiate an interconnection agreement with each carrier separately. And 12, whereas this process would be complex and costly, but doable on both the VRS side and the wireless network operator side. And there are questions about how the cost would be recovered. And 13, whereas the VoIP, VoIP providers for VRS do not support RTT, since the SIP standards they are using do not include support for anything other than voice, but RTT could be added into VoIP networks as well. 14, whereas interworking RTT supporting VoIP providers to VRS would require VRS providers to negotiate an interconnection agreement with their VoIP provider. And 15, whereas the RTT supporting VoIP provider would need to negotiate interconnection agreements with carriers and other RTT supporting VoIP providers. And 16, whereas another option may be OTT solutions rather than using the underlying RMS solutions, and implementing the full IMS stack, such as the wireless provider supporting an API that would allow the VRS providers to get access to send and receive RTT, similar to what is done for SMS, with the 3GPP standard. And 17, with the API solution, the telephone number can be queried in a database to determine if there is extra information available, specifically whether both ends of the call are RTT capable. And 18, whereas 3 VRS providers out of 4 already support RTT, which greatly benefits deafblind users. And 19, whereas for a deafblind user participating in a VRS call, the communications assistant, or CA, can receive a notification on the screen that RTT is involved, instead of responding with American Sign Language. The CA will know to respond via text. And 20, whereas RTT sent directly to a hearing user, text carryover, would be similar to voice carryover, or VCO, or hearing carryover, HCO. And 21, whereas in several European countries, RTT is already utilized in both video relay services and text relay services. Now, therefore, it is 1, recommended that the Federal Communications Commission, or the Commission, initiate a notice of inquiry, NOI, to explore the feasibility of the options outlined above, as well as how these costs are to be recovered. 2, recommended further the NOI consider whether the PIP should mandate ITU T.140 and IETF RFC 4103. And 3, recommended further the NOI consider the need for 911 RTT implementation and explore incorporating appropriate specifications. 4, recommended further the NOI consider the addition of RTT into VoIP networks. 5, recommended further the NOI consider the inclusion of RTT in the VRS user's profile, similar to VCO and HCO, so that the CA is aware of the user's needs and preferences. 6, recommended further the NOI consider the impact on research into the possible methods of routing such calls, such as interworking IMS to VRS via an API and so forth. and the development of such methods as it relates to funding and resource allocation for both VRS providers and telephone network operators. 7, recommended further the NOI considered the compensability of a VRS call involving RTT and the impact on permanent rates. And 8, recommended further the NOI consider the role of the CA in using RTT and the expectations of the deaf and deafblind users. That concludes my readout of recommendation number 2.
Thank you. Wonderful. Any comments, discussion? Yes, Susie.
Thank you for reading that second recommendation and for all of that work. Thank you so much. I just wanted to quickly bring to your attention number 18, which says that VRS provider, 3 out of 4 VRS providers already support RTT. I just wanted to clarify that that is not end-to-end, that is to the CA. So just a point of clarification, and thank you.
This is Zainab speaking. I agree with that. I want to nod my head, but for the record, I will say yes.
Okay. Further discussion? Okay, maybe someone wants to move to close the discussion. Yeah, Dennis?
Dennis Salting from Sprint. I'd like to move to close discussion.
Any second? Thank you. Discussion's closed. So now we need to move to vote on this, if we are to vote on it. Does anyone want to move to vote? Oh,
This is Zainab. This is Zainab. I move to vote.
okay. Any second?
I'll second.
Okay, Linda seconds. Thank you very much. Let's vote.
Darlene Parker, National Captioning Institute, votes yes.
Tom Ledkowski, Comcast, votes yes.
Mike Maddox, Sorensen, votes yes.
Michael Strecker with Clear Captions, votes yes.
Dixie Ziegler with Hamilton Relay, votes yes. Shelley Blakeney, T-Mobile, yes.
Tony Stevens with ACB, yes.
Townsend Davis, ABC Disney, yes.
Sam Yale, Level Access, votes yes.
Everett Bacon, National Federation of the Blind, votes yes.
Greg Jones with FEMA, pass.
Tim Cregan, Access Board, ex officio, pass.
Lisa Hamlin, Hearing Loss Association of America, yes.
Maria Diaz de Capta, vote yes.
Pam Holmes, Ultratech, votes yes.
Brian Traeger, NTID, votes yes. U.S. Department of Education, ex facto, pass. Christian Vogler, Gallaudet University Technology Access Program, votes yes. Zainab Al-Kebsi, National Association of the Deaf, votes yes. TDI votes yes. Jeff Rosen, Convo, votes yes. Greg Leibach, CSD VRS, votes yes.
Deafblind Citizens in Action votes yes.
Becky Rosenthal, NASRA, votes yes.
Carl Richardson, City of Boston, votes yes.
Ian Dolner with Verizon, votes yes.
Sarah Miller, American Foundation for the Blind, votes yes.
Apple votes yes. AT&T votes yes.
Matt Gersh with CTIA votes yes.
Heather York with VITAC, votes yes.
Dennis Salting with Sprint, votes yes.
Joel Snyder, Audio Description Associates, Audio Description Project, votes yes.
Brian Scarpelli with ACT votes yes. Great. So part 2 of the recommendations are also approved. Well, for me, I thank you to all the people in the working group. It's great to see all this work and have it supported by the committee like this. I guess I know we're short, but we're not yet over our time, and I should turn it to you, Will, I think, to talk about the next item, presentations and announcements.
Hi, this is Will. Yeah, thanks everyone. I know there's a little bit of time pressure, and MITRE, who was going to provide a presentation, has very graciously agreed to come back to the next DAC, but they are in the room. They wanted to introduce Mark Pfaff, who's in the, who I believe is here. Oh yes, stand up for 1 second. So please say hello during the lunch break and ask all your MITRE questions. And thank you, MITRE, for giving us a few extra minutes so that we can eat some lunch before our next event. So, but we have just enough time for an exciting update. I guess I'll pass it along back to the chair to pass it along.
Right. Real quickly, pleased to receive a presentation from CTIA, and I'll turn it to you, Matt.
And mention the power.
Oh, I think you have some slides display, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. There we go.
Okay, great. Well, thank you to the Disability Advisory Committee for giving us, the CTIA, a few minutes to talk about accesswireless.org. For over 10 years, CTIA's accesswireless.org has been the wireless industry's flagship resource for information about the accessibility of wireless services and devices. Accesswireless.org represents the commitment of the wireless industry and CTIA's leadership under the direction of Meredith Atwell-Baker to ensure people of all different abilities can harness wireless to participate in our 21st century community. The last major overhaul of accesswireless.org was around the time that the CVAA passed in 2010. And while some of us in this room consider the CVAA's passage to have been yesterday, it might as well have been the Stone Age in the life of a website. So with the CVAA's 10th anniversary approaching next year, we took on the initiative to update the site to respond to feedback from consumers and reflect the competitive mobile wireless ecosystem of today. So all the key features that you know are still there. Information broken down by accessibility feature, whether you're deaf or hard of hearing, blind or low vision, cognitive mobility, many other features. Hearing aid compatibility training videos are still there, but they're actually now on YouTube to make them easier to share. And you have access to the GARI, the GARI search tool for accessible devices based on their features. But we've also improved the look and feel to make the site more consistent with our current wireless and internet ecosystem. We've added an A to Z directory of industry resources and services under wireless accessibility services to make it easier to get to our member companies' accessibility sites directly. And we've added a new page dedicated to veterans. Since not all veterans identify with having a disability, we think it's important to make sure our service members and their families have a place to go to get information about the services and devices that they need. So CTIA and member companies are committed to continuing to keep accesswireless.org relevant with news, blogs, and media promoting wireless accessibility. But we couldn't have done it without guidance from our partners among the community, many of whom are sitting around this table, including the Hearing Loss Association of America, the National Association of the Deaf, American Association of People with Disabilities, the American Foundation for the Blind, the Coleman Institute for Cognitive Disabilities, and Telecommunications for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, TDI. Finally, I hope you all will join me in thanking Meredith Atwell-Baker, Jamie Hastings, Jim Schuler, Brianna Evans, who's actually sitting back here, and our entire team at CTIA who've really made accessibility a priority for CTIA and our member companies. So we hope you will all help us spread the word about the new site or the updated site, and direct friends, family, and everyone, your colleagues, to accesswireless.org. We've got some flyers and handouts, both in hard copy and Braille, available. Brianna's got them in the back here. We'll also make them available at the table. And so we thank you all for your contributions, and we hope you continue to do so and to make the site even better. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thanks very much to you, Matt, and to CTIA for that update, and also thank you for lunch today. Very kind of you all to provide lunch for all of us. Right. Before we do eat that lunch, I think what remains here is public participation. Microphone right there. Anyone from the public like to make a comment?
Mm-hmm.
Will? Will has a comment?
Hi, this is Will. And while the public is lining up at the microphone, I will read some of the one, we received one public comment online. And this public comment came from Renee Arrington Johnson. And it's a whole series of questions, but most of them kind of go together. So the questions are, or the public comments are, is there a plan to require program guides and information on streaming and broadcast media to have audio description, or maybe the logo? She might mean the logo, because the text itself is AD parentheses, which kind of looks like the logo. To indicate audio description, is there a plan to standardize the use of the secondary audio program channel, or provide an audio description channel that is only used for that purpose? Is there a plan to monitor the actual performance of media content providers regarding audio descriptions? And then the final question is, why is the camera on the signer and not on the person talking? So I'll respond a little bit to these questions. Ultimately, the camera oftentimes is on the signer in this room to make it easier for people who, make it more visible for people who read sign ASL, that they can actually see the person signing, because this room is actually quite large. Regarding your questions about audio description, any plans or future plans would be easier to see or find if you subscribed to access info at fcc.gov. Many of these questions are about the future, and we wouldn't be able to announce things unless it was publicly announced. And right now, many of your questions about having multiple secondary audio programs and having standardization for audio description on the program guides, there's no current plans. There's certainly the recommendation that you heard to encourage that many of the things that you mentioned, and but if that stuff started to come out, then it would be announced on the FCC's website, and very likely through the email listserv Access Info. So that's the public comment, the one.
That's our online public comment. Nobody at the microphone here in the room making a public comment. Oh, Zainab has a comment. Go ahead. Sorry.
This is Zainab speaking. I do want to respond to the camera comment. I just want to clarify, visibility for deaf sign users is one reason for that, but also for me, I am the person speaking and not the interpreter, so the camera should be on me since I am the speaker. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Joel.
Yeah, just to respond. Hello. There we are. Yeah. To respond to the questioner online. Excellent questions, actually. And if it's okay or appropriate, I would refer to the questioner to the website of the American Council of the Blind's Audio Description Project, www.acb.org/ADP. All of those questions have been addressed on our discussion list and in articles that are all archived on that website. So, and we would welcome the questioner's participation and emails to the list.
Okay. I guess that puts us at closing remarks. I'll be very brief. Thank you, everyone. I sure appreciate everybody's thought and effort and time. This is important work that everyone's doing, so it's great to see this progress and look forward to continued work. Any remarks on that?
I just want to echo that message and say thank you, and I want to pat everyone on the back here and DRO for all of your efforts and all the time you've put into this, and we're looking forward to in the DAC accomplishing more in the future. We turn it over to you for more information about what comes following the working group meetings, or?
I think Tom does. Yes, this is Will. I think there's a couple of final comments. I can't see who that is. Tom?
It is, yes.
Yeah.
Oops. Yeah, I keep missing people.
There you go.
Hi, this is Tom at Comcast. Just a quick question, I guess maybe to you, Will. Are you going to send the revised audio description recommendation electronically to the committee just so that we have it for our records?
Hi, this is Will. Yes, not a problem. They will be. I should send it out to everybody as the revised recommendation. That's a good point. I'll send it out to everybody for sure. Just seconds before we adjourn, when the chair says that the meeting is adjourned, I want to mention to everybody when the meeting's finished about how you can get to your next meeting. So we'll adjourn the meeting. We don't need to tell everyone online and everything about how to get to the next meeting. So with that.
Well, I think Jeff has a comment.
This is Jeff Rosen with Convo. I might be slow, but the working group after this, what is the plan for those working groups? I'm not familiar with that. I believe that there's going to be 2 tracks, and how is that going to work? Do you mind clarifying that for the group? Thank you.
Yeah, this is Will. I don't mind clarifying at all when the meeting's finished. Like, I don't know if we want to just keep. I don't know if the public wants to hear about where you stand or who's going where. That's my thought. Right. Yeah.
Okay, with that, the meeting is adjourned. Right. Oh, unless, do we need a motion? Can I just adjourn?
Next meeting date.
Yeah, the next meeting.
Oh, next meeting date? We can tell.
Next meeting date.
Yeah. Right. Right. Okay. Should I? Please do. Okay. I defer to you there. I believe we should all put a hold on our calendars at least for February 25th next year, the next meeting date. But I don't know if that is absolute yet. Correct?
Right. That's our. This is Will. That is our best guess on the next meeting date. It seems good, but things happen, and we will definitely send out a confirmation. I would reserve February 25th on your calendar now.
Okay. Does somebody have to motion to?
No. As
Okay,
the
we'll just
DFO,
adjourn.
I am ending this meeting.
All right. It's over. Adjourn.
Great.
I like that.
Thanks. All right.